Since tomorrow is Earth Day and we're here at MIT, it seems like a unique opportunity to ask you about a portfolio company whose lead researcher got his start here at MIT. And I'm talking about Carl Nelson and EEStor. And I was wondering if you're happy with the progress to date at EEStor, and also if everything pans out there, what is your vision for that company?
Well, I think, okay, so EEStor is a company that's trying to do a very tight-made gig economy, what you call it. It's not hyper, super, ultra. It's a capacitive energy storage using barium titanate. And it's difficult to do what they're trying to do, and the product isn't out yet. But if you look at energy storage, for the good, what do we typically do? We pump the water uphill and let it run downhill. People would propose to maybe you make an underground cavity and pressurize it and let the gas out or something, or you do flow batteries. Start going into electric chemistry, do flow batteries, or you do lithium-ion batteries, or you do the sodium-ion battery we talked about. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you say, it's volta, right? The voltaic cell. This is old stuff. It kind of violates my rule about not doing something that could have been done in the 19th century. I'd like to think the future isn't going to just be electrochemistry, that we could have solid-state energy storage, something that's based on, maybe early 20th century, so maybe a quantum effect or something that lets us have something which is almost perfectly efficient and has some kind of Moore's law effect to it and be very, very durable and high power and high energy density. So you'd like to have that. And EEStor is an example of something solid state. And what I say from investing is I prefer solids to liquids and liquids to gases. And we prefer semiconductors as our favorite kind of solid. Okay, and it's just because we can engineer it. When things sit still, we can engineer their structure more, and it's more predictable. And we get access to semiconductor physics, which lets us interact with heat and light and all these. There's all these magical things we can do that came out of, say, quantum theory or limit. Liquid phase or chemistry, you've got free energy bounds on everything you do, and it can get messy because you get chemicals and ions around, you get side reactions, and materials fall apart. Whereas a solid state, it's the basis of electronics, it can last basically forever. And in gases, things move around, and it's hard to have a lot of innovations there. So energy storage is the same thing. I'd like to see it go from liquid phase chemistry, essentially, to solid state physics. That would be a very desirable, and maybe the limit case of energy storage, it should be solid state. Now, it's an open question, probably, whether will that transition occur in this decade, or the next decade, or 2 decades from now. I mean, it's great to have people trying it, but it's hard. And so when we had this list of 25 grand challenges, we went out looking for things. We didn't expect to find them all. And if we find investable things that read on one of those grand challenges, we don't necessarily expect it to work. If a list of 25, 10 of them work, that would be a miracle, because they're set to be very aspirational. So solid-state energy storage would be on the list. And that's an example of an investment that's trying to, with a improvement on an existing technology, essentially, because barium titanate is used as a material, a common material in capacitors, an improvement on the technology to get there through a very, controversial way of using that material. So we can't always predict, we can't always predict what materials are going to do. We can't do computational model biology. We don't have computer simulations with perfect fidelity for any of these things. So we have to go try things. And one of our sayings is we prefer things that work in practice to things that work in theory. And it's nice if they work in theory, but we can always invent the theory afterwards. But I prefer not to violate the second law of conservation of energy, the standard model. There's some things we don't, if you need a magnetic monopole, I'm not really interested. So we can't always simulate things. We are willing to lose a couple $1 million to try to see if some effect is plausible or work that we don't have a closed form computer simulation. for. But it's plausible that people trained in the art that it's not, they can't explain to me in a napkin why it would be.
But for what it's worth, every year Tech Review chooses the 10 technologies we think are most promising to have some kind of breakthrough in the near future, and solid state was one of them, and EEStor is one of the examples we pointed out.
I'd love to find, if someone has another solid state energy storage speculative, it's hard enough to invest in another one of those.
If it all could have been done before 1900, I would say...
It's hard to get into the startups because they will...
If it could have all been manufactured more than 20 years ago, I'd say don't do it. But if it uses 20th century stuff and would have only been manufactured in the last 20 years, then maybe take a job. That's just a general rule of thumb. It's not perfect, but it will keep you out of trouble about 9 times out of 10. Because a lot of things were tried and failed.
Where did you intern? When you were at Northeast?
Nobody wants to talk about their failures. It's really sad in a way.
When you were at Northeast,
out there, that if there's a team, a person, somebody out there that already may have a solution that hasn't been discovered, is that something that you think is possible? Like a crowdsourcing type of, or instead of crowdsourcing to an individual, there may be somewhere, somebody in the world that's working on something.
It doesn't tend to work that way. I think it proceeds from somebody who has deep expertise in a domain, who acquires interdisciplinary collaborators. That's a better formula. And there are no child prodigies in these fields that involve physics and chemistry. You really just have, you know, you mentioned Carl Nelson. He's like 90 years old. He's an MIT PhD material scientist who's one of the inventors under EEStor. I mean, if you don't have someone like Carl, you ask Carl, tell me something about hafnium. Carl will talk to you for 15 minutes about hafnium. He knows something about every element in the periodic table. He can tell you off the top of his head what its crystal forms are and a lot of interesting properties. I mean, you have to be intimate with the periodic table to do this kind of stuff. You have to know, you really have to have a career. And with somebody like that, he's probably the oldest founder I ever backed. But you just have dinner with him and you realize he really understands what he's doing with materials. Now what they're proposing to do is wild. And there's lots of reasons in which some of these things could fail to be commercialized. You know, I'm not saying whether it's worked or not and we've announced it or not. I'm just saying it's hard. Right? What they're trying, obviously it took years to get, since they first, it's not easy to do these things. So, but the worthwhile things usually